Mark Rogers TV with the instant analysis of Miami's win over Duke, 31-6. Impressive road win for the Hurricanes. To move on to 3-0 on the season, of course, they've lost the two games to the Hurricane. Duke falls to 4-1. And the first big Coastal Division matchup in the ACC this season goes to Miami, the much more physically dominant team, the faster team, the more athletic team. Duke, a fine football team. And it was mentioned several times on the broadcast, a much more physically imposing defense than what we've seen in recent years. And they really held down Miami to 17 points for the bulk of the football game. For the competitive portion of the game, it was 17-6. But Duke doesn't have the explosive players on offense. They do not have the offensive line to run the type of run-oriented offense that they want to and to compete at the level of Miami and some of the teams that they will face later in the schedule, depending on who they've got out of the Atlantic Division. So let's focus on Miami. Again, Duke, a solid team. Think Kansas State, Minnesota, 7-5 type team. They are much improved over last season, much more physically imposing defensively. And Daniel Jones is a fine quarterback who shoulders too much of the load on offense. And David Cutcliffe bringing in some players with some fine recruiting classes in recent years that should help in that endeavor. All right, let's start with Miami. Let's go player by player in regards to the key players in this one and looking forward to the Florida State game. Malik Rocher, of course, 15 of 26, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, and the 1 interception was a bad overthrow, but the rush was right in his face and affected the throw, and that was downfield and trying to hit Amon Richards on a post pattern. He had an impressive play for the first touchdown of the game to Braxton Berrios, and that was a very similar play in trying to hit a deep post and having a rush right in his face. He was hurried on the throw, but he delivered it on time and right to the back of the end zone and right into Richards or into Berrios' arms for the touchdown. Braxton Berrios, with the first touchdown of the game, has been the deep threat in the absence of Amon Richards, and we saw what Richards means to this offense. 3 catches for $106 and a touchdown, but it was the first 2 receptions of the game that really extended scoring drives and were perfectly thrown footballs by Malik Rocher. And Richards made tremendous over-the-shoulder catches, hands catches, and got his feet in bounds to convert big plays. Again, 3 catches for 106 and a touchdown, and he could have had another late touchdown, but the offensive pass interference was called to prevent a second touchdown by Richards. So he's dealing with the hammy. We saw him still have enough juice on the crossing route in which they drove out the deep safeties and then brought Richards across the middle, threw him the football, and he was wide open. But Duke players still had the angle to flag him down, but they couldn't, much because Richards is that kind of athlete, but also because they took poor angles, and that was the touchdown play to rest up for Florida State. The hammy did show that he's lost a little bit, and that needs to be taken care of. But again, he brings another dimension to this Miami offense. Rocher was very hot to start. He cooled off. He finished strong, but he's going to have to play better, you would think, against Florida State, unless this Miami defense, and we'll get to it in just a second, holds Florida State in single digits, because that is possible based on what we've seen of the Noles against NC State and what we saw out of the Canes D. Want to hit, though, on Mark Walton, of course, suffering the ankle injury in the last game against Toledo, even though we rushed for a personal best 204 yards in that game. In this one, it was a combination of the Duke defense being much improved. The rush defense is one of the best in college football statistically, not one of the best in college football, but a very fine rush defense, probably one of the 25 to 40 best in college football. Plus, they were focusing on Mark Walton. Solid game plan defensively for Duke. Of course, you take the best player out of the game, you stop the run, and you say, Malik Rocher, you've got to beat us with precision passing. Did he do that? Well, he obviously did good enough with the help of the defense that only gave up 6 points. So it was a sound approach defensively by Duke and David Cutcliffe, but Mark Walton because of that approach by the Duke defense, 17 carries for 51 yards, and also losing a little of explosive playmaking ability because of the ankle. He went down late in the game. It didn't appear to be anything more than a tweak of the ankle once again. And Mark Walton, though, shows that he's a multidimensional player. The two big plays that he gave this offense were out of the backfield as a pass receiver. He leaked out. They designed plays for him that drew the Duke defense elsewhere, gave him a one-on-one matchup with a player that could not hang with him, and he turned them into big pass plays downfield. Again, key to the scoring drives. 4 catches for 79 yards for Mark Walton, although he was limited to the 51 rushing. All right, let's talk about the Miami defense. You saw guys like Darian Owens, Michael Pinckney making plays in space. So this game came down to Miami's defensive front dominating Duke's offensive line. Duke had more yardage in this game most of the game. So the final numbers, 406 total yards for the Miami offense and 349 for Duke. But for the competitive portion of this game, Duke outgained Miami, but they didn't have the explosive plays. Miami had the explosive plays with Berrios and Richards in particular, and Walton out of the backfield as a pass catcher. Duke did not have the explosive plays. Almost every drive was the same. They got the ball deep in their own end, and they typically would rip off a number of nice gains on the ground, maybe complete a pass. The most impressive one was the slant when it was still a good game at 14-3 or 14-6, when DJ Taylor hauled in the slant from Daniel Jones, who had the rush right in his face, and was the third and long play, and he delivered it on time. Beautiful play, but just not enough of those in the Duke arsenal. So typically they had to try to grind it out, and you're not going to do that against Miami's defense and be able to, without any explosive 20 and 25-yard plays, go 80 yards. So almost every drive looked the same. Run it for 8, run it for 5, run it for even 11 or 12 and look really good and pick up a couple first downs, and they would pick up typically 30, 35, 40 yards on each drive. And then one of the Miami defenders, with the help of the D-line doing its job, would make a tackle in the backfield in space. Darian Owens made some nice plays in space in hauling down some ball carriers. Michael Pinckney with the interception and also was able to play in space. Joe Jackson played out of his mind, especially in the first half, with some huge plays. And R.J. McIntosh, of course, with just closing down the pocket, and that's what we saw a number of times on 3rd and long as well. Daniel Jones back in the pocket probably does his best work from outside the pocket. Plus, how many times did we see the Miami rush just collapse on Daniel Jones and not give him a chance? So it was a defensive dominant performance from the front seven of Miami. Also should be noted that Malik Young at cornerback was all over TJ Rahming and did not allow Duke's most talented receiver to get loose. He was consistently harassing him, on him, all over him. And there was a huge play in the game on a 4th and 3 in which Duke and David Cutcliffe, and you could tell by the decisions that David Cutcliffe made that he knew he had an outmanned football team that needed to convert 4th down. So even when the game wasn't out of reach, he was still, and David Cutcliffe is one of the best in the business, he knew he needed to make calculated risks to keep the football away from Miami and give his offense a chance when it had good field position. Even late in the game, I thought it was the only play that he could make on a 4th and inches at his own 19-yard line. He went for it. But on this particular play, they threw the slant on 4th and 3, typically a very safe play. The ball was on the money, but Malik Young made the pass breakup that gave the ball back to the offense. Travis Homer got loose late in the game. Tack-on touchdown, looks good for his stats from 40 yards to make it 31-6. Pat Bethel, the sophomore out of Vero Beach, with a forced fumble, the strip sack, and the big guy got up and went after the football and flagged it down for the fumble recovery, as Miami was all over Duke in this one. Again, 31-6, an impressive showing by Miami against a solid Duke football team. But It gets much more difficult for Miami next week against Florida State. Of course, we will preview and predict that one as the game gets closer. For Duke, still much to play for this season. Of course, Miami could falter, and Duke, though they have pretty much a 2-game deficit, would have to surpass Miami in the standings to play in the ACC championship game. That's probably not going to happen, but it looks like another 7-5 Duke edition as they move on to 4-1. And they've got a date at Virginia, which is not nearly as easy as it would have appeared about a month ago, with the Cavaliers playing very strong football in recent weeks, coming off a big win on the road against Boise State. Talking Miami, talking Duke. Would love to hear your comments. Subscribe to my YouTube channel for the best in college football analysis, not just from myself, but we bring on the best bloggers and broadcasters in college football. Long-form discussions you can catch on iTunes, Podbean, and also Stitcher. Just search Mark Rogers TV.